Soundboard Basics, the parts of the soundboard. The purpose of this video is to orient you to the parts of a soundboard, specifically a Mackie SR 24-4, but many of the principles discussed here will be applicable to a wide variety of soundboards. The first thing you need to know about a soundboard is that it has channels. You can see 3 of them highlighted here in blue, red, and green. The purpose of a channel is to take a source of sound, be that a vocalist, a speaker, an instrument, or a CD player or a computer, and give that individual sound a way to be directed, split, equalized, shaped, and then blended with the other sounds that are coming into the board to create one cohesive sound for the main speakers, but also sound for other areas that might want sound, like the monitor speakers, the hearing assist system, different places where sound might be directed. So the purpose of the channels are to shape and amplify the sound, as well as split and redirect the sound to all the various places that it ought to go. Most of the physical space on the board is taken up with the channel strips. This is a Mackie SR 24-4, which is a fairly standard piece of equipment for use in most churches or clubs or various places where you might want to reinforce sound. And so it's got 24 input channels and 4 sub buses. More on what that is later. Looking at the channels, it can be a bit overwhelming, but as soon as you understand that it's the same thing repeated over and over again 22 times, it makes it a little bit less intimidating. Channels 1 through 20 are mono, which means that they only have a single input, whereas 21-22 and 23-24 are stereo inputs, which means that you can plug a left and a right into them, but both the left and the right are controlled together within the one channel strip for a total of 22. The controls of the board are laid out horizontally. These allow you to change the sound in various ways. In green you see highlighted the gain, which allows you to control volume. The red are the auxiliary sends, which allows you to direct sound in different ways. The blue are the equalization, which allows you to reshape sound. And then below that you have pan, which allows you to balance stereo left and right. And then a number of assignment buttons and the slider. And so these controls are laid out horizontally and are the same all the way across the board. So every channel, the controls are duplicated over and over and over again. So if it's overwhelming for you to see all of these channels and controls laid out, know that they're all duplicated and laid out in groups in a way that once you understand them is really not that hard to manage. Let's say that you want to change channel 16, highlighted here in red, and the way in which you want to change it is to adjust the high EQ. This might be because the sound is indistinct, and therefore you want to raise the amount of high EQ or treble in the sound so that it's sharper or clearer. Maybe it's too tinny and it sounds brittle and unpleasant, and so you want to bring the high EQ down to make it a little bit softer and more palatable. However you want to change the sound, you need to know which of the channels it is that you want to adjust, and horizontally which of the controls will have the desired effect that you want to achieve. There's a difference between the various controls in the soundboard. The vast majority of them are dials, and then for each channel there are sliders. You approach dials and sliders differently. For example, the gain at the top of the board in white is a dial that adjusts the volume. The slider also adjusts the volume, but they do it in slightly different ways. The slider is simpler and easier to manage, and so if you need to make a quick change, you use the slider. The dial is a little bit more complex and finicky, and so you use those 2 different forms of adjustment together. The general rule is that when you're first setting up the channel, you use the dials. You balance the sound with the gain, and you shape the sound with the EQ. And unless you've made a mistake when you were first setting that board up, you really shouldn't need to do any adjustment that's very significant to those dials after the channel is appropriately set up. The sliders are there for making fine adjustments during the performance. So if there's a solo and suddenly the guitar is way too loud or not loud enough to be heard, then moving the slider up and down is a quick and easy and very visual and tactile way to adjust the sound quickly in the moment. And then generally you'll bring the slider back to where it was. So understanding dials and sliders, you need to understand that setting up, you want to adjust all the dials in a way that's going to work for the performance. And then the sliders are used for fine and subtle adjustments later on. In addition to the channels, there's also a section off to the right which has the main volume. You can see the red dials at the top, which are the main volume for each of the auxiliary sends. So that dial, rather than controlling an individual channel, controls all of the auxiliary volumes for that entire control. So if you want to bring the monitor mix up or down holistically, then you can just adjust that one dial, and all of the instruments will be louder or quieter in the monitor mix. Down at the bottom you have your sub sliders and your main slider, which control the overall level. So with your main slider, you can quickly and easily adjust the overall level up or down. So if the music suddenly gets much louder, rather than having to change every single slider for the band, you can just drop the main slider down and suddenly all of the volume level is quieter. If there's a really quiet song and nobody can hear, rather than adjust all of the individual channels, bump the main slider up just a little and problem solved. Taking a closer look at the main and sub sliders, we're going to be looking more at how these work in the next section on signal flow. But for now, what you need to understand is these are various ways of controlling the volume. The main controls volume for everything on the board. If you pull the mains down all the way, nothing will be coming through the main speakers. Now, the subs, you assign channels to those subs. So the vocals are all assigned to sliders 1 and 2 on the sub channel. All of the instruments are assigned to 3 and 4. So if the channels are all set properly and the main mix is up, but the vocal sliders are down, you won't be able to hear any of the vocals. So this is an additional way to control the sound that's assigned on a channel by channel basis. So you can choose for something to go directly to the main mix, or you can choose to have it go through a sub slider first. That way all of the vocals can be controlled as a group. And if the main mix is fine, but the vocals just need to be a little bit louder, by moving those two sliders up, the vocals can be brought into balance with the instruments quickly and easily. And so you might have the drum kit with 5 mics on it, and you decide that 1 or 2 of the sliders should be dedicated to the drum mix, so that those 5 microphones together can be controlled as a unit. So this is a way of grouping various channels and controlling them as a single unit. And that can be, of course, very useful. Here we have a blow-up of the slider section. There are a number of important things to know here. First of all, at the top you see the pan dial, and beside the pan dial there's a green and red light. Green means that there's signal flowing through that channel, and that's good. Red means that there's too much signal flowing through the channel, and that's bad. Below that is the mute button. When the mute is depressed, then the red light below it will light up solidly. The solo button directly below the mute button, when that is selected, that same light will flash red instead of being solid red. And that tells you that the channel is soloed, which means it's isolated and sent to the headphones. So if you want to adjust a particular channel and only that channel, this allows you to isolate it and listen to it separately through the headphones. Below that we have the assignment section, 1, 2, 3, 4, and left, right. For the sound to go anywhere when the slider is up, one of those 3 has to be depressed. You can have more than one depressed, and so we're going to get into what exactly those do when we get into signal flow, but for now you just need to know that one of the 3 of those has to be selected for any sound to leave the board and go out the main speakers. Here you see a blow-up of the EQ and the pan. Pan simply controls the stereo mix, whether the sound appears in the left speaker or the right speaker or a balance of the two. EQ is the primary way in which you affect the shape of the sound. You can take the treble sounds and turn them up or down with the high EQ at the top of those 4 dials. You can adjust the bass higher or lower with the dial at the bottom. And then there's a button allowing you to cut off the bass signal in a preset pattern. The 2 center buttons, the second and the third of the 4 buttons, those control mids, but they do it in 2 different ways. The mid dial allows you to raise or lower the mid section, but then the second dial is a sweep, which allows you to change where in the spectrum the mids fall. So if the particular instrument that you're trying to affect, the sweet spot for that instrument is more towards the treble than it is right in the center, you can sweep it to the right, which means that it's going to be more treble mid than central mid. Or if you sweep it to the left, it's going to shift that point at which the mids are to the left more towards the bass. So by sweeping that back and forth, you can find the sweet spot for that instrument and then boost or drop that portion of the equalization just for that particular instrument. Here you see the gain dial, which controls the volume for the overall channel, and you see the auxiliary sends, which send information somewhere other than the main speakers, to a monitor, to a hearing assist system, or to a recording. So by adjusting these dials, you adjust a custom mix for each of those various destinations. Finally, you see here a blow-up of the auxiliary mains. And so that row of red dials on the left-hand side, those are the main volume for each of the individual auxiliary sends. So there you can change the volume of the monitor mix in its entirety by raising or lowering that. And right beside it is the solo button. And the solo button allows you to hear the monitor mix as a whole, or the recording or the hearing assist system. Anywhere that you might send sound, you can hit the solo button and hear what the full mix of that particular channel is sounding like. Thank you for taking the time to take a look at this brief overview of the Mackie SR24 soundboard. I'm hopeful that you found it useful, and if you have lots of questions, as I'm sure that you do if you're new to this sort of thing, there will be more videos coming. Thanks. Have a great day.